Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Malicious Compliance. Story 1. You really want to hear war stories? Okay. This is a story I was told by my grandfather, G, about when he and his brother were kids and spoke to their grandfather, G, who was a WW1 vet. My great-great-grandfather. It's malicious to be sure, but it's kind of messed up. My grandfather and his family are from Tindergeland, which is today the most southern bit of Denmark. But during WW1 it was the most northern part of the German Empire. The people there identified as Danes and spoke Danish, but were Germans and therefore had to fight in the war on the German side. Gigi never wanted to talk about the war for obvious reasons, and people also had to be mindful not to drop anything, as loud noises apparently set him off. People in the family always respected this, except for my grandfather's brother, who wanted to hear some cool war stories and kept pestering him for it, asking what he did and if he killed anyone and the like. Keep in mind this is a bratty child around the age of 8. And PTSD wasn't fully understood in this time. This is the late 40s we're talking. Gigi kept saying no and the boy kept pestering. Eventually the boy started leaning back in his chair only to lean forward again so that it would make a loud bang against the floor. And he did this several times while his grandfather visibly shook with each thump, while the rest of the family told him to stop. But eventually Gigi shouted at him to stop and that he would tell him some war stories. Turns out my Gigi grandfather and his regiment, Regiment 84, committed some pretty heinous war crimes in Belgium. I've hidden some details below. Click on it to read if you want to. Apparently they were constantly told stories about German troops being killed in horrific ways in surprise attacks by Belgian civilians. And as a result they were told to kill any who seemed suspicious. He explained how they really feared even old ladies and children. So they shot them. They burnt down their homes. He even told of coming across an old man walking down the road, and some of the other soldiers thought that he was going to report their position to French troops. So they stripped him naked and beat him to death. Needless to say, the boy never asked for stories again. My grandfather describes his grandfather as a kind man. Except of course if you tried to press him on the war. And I think it really goes to show what war does to a person. That a seemingly kind person becomes capable of doing such things. TLDR, I'm related to a monster, it's kind of weird. Story 2. Credit card ask for ID. For reasons unimportant to the story, I was reminded today of something that happened decades ago. I worked many years for Toys R Us, RIB, throughout high school and college. One late December evening, a customer wanted to check out with the hot new video game console, a not small transaction. For payment he presented a credit card. Our corporate policy was to ask for ID with any card payment. He approached my checkout with what was unquestionably one of our largest sales of the day. I rang him up and requested his payment and, as required by policy and the written statement on his card identification. He immediately became belligerent and informed me that I was contractually obligated to part with valuable wares without any assurance that he was who he said he was or that I would actually receive remuneration for them. Fun fact, I looked it up later, that's true. As a condition of accepting card payments, merchants must agree to contractual language promulgated by card issuers, and in most cases that precludes sellers from requiring identification. However, neither this man nor me are parties to that contract. Nor does this man have any reason to believe that his retail checkout clerk in South Carolina has any knowledge of or is paid enough to care about some contract someone in an office park in Paramus, New Jersey may or may not have agreed to with Visa or MasterCard. Naturally, upon being informed that I refused his purchase, he threatened to sue me personally and demanded to speak to my manager. I, in fact, was the highest-ranking employee in the store that day. With a pittance more/hour above minimum wage, several years more experience than any other hourly employee, and anyone with more clout than me off for the holiday, I was the manager on duty and had stepped onto a register myself to expedite operations. I cheerfully told him I would be happy to get the manager for him. I literally spun on my heel and then asked him how I could help him. I made him re-explain to the manager why he was upset with my associate. He ultimately then presented his ID, but the manager agreed that photo ID was entirely irrelevant as the customer had said, if the card was signed I must accept it based upon his signature. Unfortunately, however, the signature on the card and the signature on the receipt did not match. The card was prominently signed "Ask for ID." The payment slip was signed "Close," but clearly not a match. My employer was therefore contractually required to refuse the transaction and to report the fraudulent attempt resulting in a card freeze. Can I trust you to find the exit, or will you require the assistance of the local constabulary? He was served a formal trespass notice, and in an abundance of caution I also called every store within 3 counties to ensure no one was duped by that clever near match. Story 3. I think you guys will enjoy this one. https://jalopnik.com/Georgia auto dealer who paid ex-employee with 90-000 OI 1850565176. TLDR, employee quit. Boss paid final check after being ordered to buy the dole and oily pennies dumped on the employee's driveway. Now he has to pay that employee 40k. Story 4. Sports bar manager changing the TV. I was at a sports bar watching UFC fights on a Saturday afternoon. It was pretty dead until around 5 when the early dinner crowd started arriving. One family came in and asked their waitress if they could switch the large projector screen from the fights. She came over and asked me, and I said it was fine as long as they put the fights on another TV. The family had the main TV switched to ESPN, which had one of their special documentaries on at that time rather than live sports. Then the family asked if they could switch the smaller TV that I had switched to the fights. The waitress said no since they'd already requested another TV. The family was annoyed and asked for the manager. When the manager got to their table, the father demanded that the fights be changed so their son, who was probably around 8, couldn't see the fights since they were violent and not family-friendly. The manager tried to calm the family by moving the fights to a TV behind their son, which I would have been fine with. However, the father demanded that the fights couldn't be on any TV as long as the family was at the sports bar. Then he accused the manager of not caring about young children for insisting that the fights remain on somewhere. The manager nodded and said he'd get the TV sorted out. Then he also asked the father if he should change the music playing since it was pop. The father grunted about that being nice, and how the manager was finally being responsible and looking out for children. While this was happening, the manager sent the family's waitress over to put their order in. Then once their order was in the system, the manager switched the TV again. He put the UFC fights back on the main TV, but this time he turned the sound on as well since the pop music could be bad for children. The father started loudly complaining again and called the manager back over. He demanded that the TV be changed again, and when the manager said no, the father demanded to speak to the owner. The manager said he'd get the owner, but it may take a few minutes. The manager changed into a sport coat and came back over. It turned out he was a part owner of the sports bar. Now the father really lost and said his family was leaving. The owner calmly asked if he should have the family's meals changed to take-out orders. The father said they were leaving and wouldn't pay for the food the family had ordered. The owner said the family had to pay for their meals since they were already being cooked. The father continued arguing until the owner threatened to call the cops if they left without paying. The family ended up paying, but left when their food came several minutes later. Until they left, the father made the son sit there with his eyes closed and ears covered so he wasn't exposed to the fight. I busted out laughing once the family left. Story 5. I should help you but not him. One time, many years ago, I worked in a fairly decent restaurant as a cook. One night, one of my coworkers was going to be clocking out soon, and asked me to help with a few tasks so he would be ready to go. I had time, so I agreed, and started working on some of these items. Enter bossy not boss. He started complaining, and told me that all of those things was that guy's work, and I shouldn't be helping. Okay. I was pretty new, so I stopped and let it go. Later that night Bossy Not Boss was getting ready to clock off, and asked me to help with some of his items. I pointed out that those were his items, and he needed to take care of them. Man oh man, did he get pissed. He threatened to punch me, which would have been a huge mistake, for multiple reasons. He stormed off and had to do all his tasks on his own, while I piddled around in the kitchen. Story 6. Make me run the mile fine ill walk. Flashback to when I was a teenager in high school, more than half my life ago at this point. Back in freshman year I had PE, big shock I know, and everyone on a whole we would go to the track to run a mile. I was normally reasonably fast being young and relatively athletic, finishing before the majority of the class but never at the head of the pack. Well, on this particular day, I was sick. So sick that I honestly shouldn't have gone to school, but my dad, to no one's surprise, didn't believe me and made me go anyway. It was some pulmonary thing like bronchitis I think. It also happened to be the day we were to run the mile. I had informed the coach that I was ill and asked to sit out. He, like my dad, wasn't having it. He basically said if I'm well enough to be at school I'm well enough to go the mile. Fine, I'll go, but I can barely breathe so there's no way I'm running. So I just walk. Not slowly, but at a normal pace, probably about the same pace as just of the slackers from class. As you might have guessed I'm at the end of the pack. I'm getting lapped by everyone. Now if you've ever run a mile on the track then you know you have to do a few laps to get the full mile. I think it's 4 laps but it's been like 20 years so forgive me if I don't remember. So everyone else has already finished as I walk up to the line and they're all expecting me to be done too. But you see, the thing is, this was only my 3rd lap. So when the coach gives me a look all I say is I still have 1 more lap to go. And continue on my merry way. So because the coach couldn't see how obviously sick I was, I made him and the entire rest of the class wait sitting in the hot desert sun while I gingerly waltzed my way down the track, the only one left out there. Maybe next time when someone was sick he believed them, but I honestly doubt it. He wasn't the type to take a lesson learned to heart. Story 7. The procedure. Hello there, first time posting, but today I was hit by an MC. I know my account is new, and I created it just to post this. The other account might be a bad influence. For some context, I work in a major telecoms company in Brazil, in the centralized infrastructure team, and we use a tool by another software organization, AD, to manage our service orders. And our activities range from refueling gas as diesel generators, to soldering and replenishing cooling gas in big air conditioning systems, just to keep the equipment responsible for the data and signal running in any climate condition, except for flooding, hurricane and etc. To keep and register these orders, we have a bunch of procedures that only AD can change, so that we need to jump through a bunch of hoops to not compromise the process in the auditing phase of the year. Last month we asked the support from AD to include some other evidences in the script followed by our technicians to fulfill an order of refueling a generator, and they did, by the letter what we asked. A month later and my emotionally unstable boss, story for another sub, demanded we change the title of this new evidence filed from Complete Generator, Attached Mobile, to Complete Generator, removing the sentence in the brackets. Cue the MC, so I filed a request for the change of name, and followed up with a call so that this request gets done quickly. Sometimes they take months, and in my talk over the phone with the support guy I tried to be very diligent and said we need to get the brackets part out, and just leave the other sentence, and he only heard the first half and complied. In the afternoon, minutes before a meeting to update the new change for the boss, a team member checked the change and saw that the support guy only removed the brackets from the entire title leaving it like Complete Generator Attached Mobile. We stayed facing each other in shock, and scrambled to call back there to talk to someone again to fix this thing and then started laughing hard about the panic and the utter compliance on the first instruction we gave to support. In the end the meeting got cancelled and we have a correct procedure title now. Thank and sorry if any part didn't make sense. English is not my first language and writing is the bane of my existence. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.